It's WrestleMania week. WrestleMania is this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, April 6 and 7, or as we wrestling nerds call it, Wrestling Nerd Christmas. I don't know if anybody actually calls it that. I might have just invented it, but whatever. That's what I'm calling it. Wrestling Nerd Christmas, WrestleMania 40. And since we have a brand new WrestleMania coming up in just a few days, I thought it would be fun to take a look back at some of the past WrestleManias and mine that rich resource of wrestling history to come up with my all-time WrestleMania card. This is a thing that we wrestling nerds like to do from time to time, but just to make it a little more interesting and to introduce a tiny element of challenge, not to make it hard or, so challenging that it's not enjoyable, but just to get the creative juices flowing and to force myself to think and make some decisions. I came up with some rules to govern my choices for what my all-time WrestleMania card would be. And I thought I would share those rules with you. So if you wanted to play this little game and put together your own all-time WrestleMania card, according to the parameters that I have laid out, and then share it with everybody in the comments, I don't know. I think that would be neat. And by the way, in case you can't tell, this is a wrestling video. This is a Wrestling Nerds Only video. If you don't like pro wrestling, if it just happens to not be your thing, you can safely turn this off and go back and do whatever you were doing before you clicked on the video. And if you're a subscriber of mine, you can come back when you see that I've posted a new Star Trek video or whatever, and we'll all be doing great. But if you're not into wrestling, there's not going to be a lot here for you. So just fair warning. Anyway, so here are the rules I came up with for how I am going to select my all-time WrestleMania card. And in fact, have already selected not one, but two all-time WrestleMania cards, which I will share with you momentarily. But first, here are the rules I came up with. So we're going to shoot for a total match time of between 2 and 3 hours. So when you put together your all-time WrestleMania card and you're selecting this match from this WrestleMania and that match from that WrestleMania, make sure you add up the total time of all those matches, and it needs to come out to between 2 and 3 hours. And match times are easy to find. There's all kinds of websites where you can look up old match results, and it'll have the time next to the match result. So I used Cage Match for mine, but there's other resources you can turn to on the internet as well. But total match time for your all-time WrestleMania card between 2 and 3 hours. Only one match may be selected from each WrestleMania. So if you choose, let's say, Savage versus Steamboat from WrestleMania 3, you can't also put Hogan versus Andre from WrestleMania 3 on the same all-time WrestleMania show. It can only be one match per WrestleMania, with a couple of notable exceptions. 2-night WrestleManias, which for the last couple years, 3 or 4 years now, WrestleMania has gone from being a 1-night to a 2-night show. So we're going to treat 2-night WrestleManias as 2 separate shows. In other words, if you have a match from, let's say, WrestleMania 38 on Saturday that you really want to put on your all-time show, and then you also have another match from WrestleMania 38 Sunday that you also want to put on your all-time show, you can do both. 2-night WrestleManias are considered 2 separate shows. And in a similar vein, but kind of in the opposite direction, WrestleMania 2 will be considered one show. WrestleMania 2 is the one that took place at 3 different venues all across the country. Some of it took place in the New York area, some of it took place in Chicago, some of it took place in Los Angeles. So technically 3 different shows with 3 different crews scattered throughout the country, but it was presented in one night as one continuous show. So WrestleMania 2, one show. So only one match from WrestleMania 2. The opening match must have been the opening match for its WrestleMania. The closing match for your all-time WrestleMania card must have been the closing match for its WrestleMania. And opening or closing matches from WrestleMania cannot be used in other positions on the all-time card. So your opening match for your WrestleMania show, for your all-time WrestleMania, has to have been the opener of its WrestleMania, like of the proper show, not on the pre-show or anything, like the proper WrestleMania card. Opening match has to have actually been the opening match of its WrestleMania. Closing match has to have actually been the closing match of its WrestleMania. And all of the matches you select in between your opener and your closer, none of them can also have been the opener or the closer of their shows. Couple of more parameters. No wrestler may appear in more than one match. We're not going to have anybody working twice in one night. I know that has actually been done several times in WrestleMania history, where wrestlers have worked multiple times on the same show. But for our purposes, and just to keep things inclusive and diverse and have some variety on the show, no one working more than once on the WrestleMania show. Also, no title may be defended more than once. So if you have a favorite Intercontinental title match, then that's your Intercontinental title match for your all-time WrestleMania show. You can't have the title being defended multiple times by multiple champions from multiple WrestleManias, okay? Now, the card must include at least 4 title matches in total. At least. You can have more, but at least 4 title matches in total. And these are the 4 title matches that your all-time WrestleMania card must include. You must have a WWE/WWF World or Universal title match. Those are the 3 main, like, top-level main event championships that have been defended at WrestleMania over the years. You have to have a match where at least one of those titles is on the line. WWE title, World title, or Universal title. You also must have a match that has a WWE or World Tag Team title match, or whatever it's called. Basically, the men's tag team title. WWF/WWE tag team title, World Tag Team title, Raw Tag Team title, SmackDown Tag Team title. Now it's the Unified Tag Team titles. Whatever it's called, whatever specific title that you want to use, there has to be a men's tag team title match. There also has to be either an Intercontinental or United States title match. You can have one of each if you want, but you have to have at least one of either an Intercontinental or a United States title match. You must also have a match for a women's singles championship. And again, there have been several women's singles titles that have been defended at WrestleMania over the years. One of the matches on your all-time WrestleMania card must be for a women's singles championship. You also must have at least 3 one-on-one singles matches, and the title matches count for those. You can have your 3 singles title matches, and that's also your 3 singles matches. But you could also have title matches that were 3-way matches or 4-way matches, right? So at least 3 standard, classic, traditional one-on-one singles matches need to be on your show. Your show must also include at least 1 2-on-2 tag team match. Again, that can be one of your tag team title matches, or it can be a tag team match where a title wasn't on the line, because, again, there have been matches on WrestleMania where the tag titles have been contested in 3 ways and 4 ways, et cetera, et cetera. So your all-time WrestleMania card must have at least 1 2-on-2 tag team match. It also must include at least 1 men's match and at least 1 women's match. Have a nice balanced card, right? Also, no gimmick match may be used more than once. There have been multiple gimmick matches at WrestleMania over the years. So if you want to use one of those classic gimmick matches for your all-time WrestleMania card, go for it, but you can only use each gimmick once. And a Hell in a Cell match is going to be considered a cage match for these purposes. So if you use a Hell in a Cell match from a WrestleMania, that's your cage match. You can't do another cage match if you also have a Hell in a Cell match. By the same token, TLC and Money in the Bank matches are considered ladder matches. So if you want to have, let's say, the first Money in the Bank match on your all-time WrestleMania card, that's fine. You can do that, but you cannot also then have Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon ladder match for the Intercontinental title on the same card. You can't. You have to pick one, because TLC and Money in the Bank matches count as ladder matches. And also, just to keep things from getting too repetitive on the all-time show, street fights, no holds barred, falls count anywhere, hardcore matches, anything goes, extreme rules, we're going to consider all of that the same kind of match. A no count out, no DQ, anything goes match, whether they call it a street fight or no holds barred or falls count anywhere, hardcore, extreme rules, whatever, that's all the same match. That's all the same gimmick. So you can have one of those. Okay? Now, since given you the rules that I have laid out for how you can choose your all-time WrestleMania card. Let me show you how it works in practice. I put together 2 all-time WrestleMania cards, and I built both of these shows around the Intercontinental title match. 2 of my favorite all-time WrestleMania matches were both for the Intercontinental title. So I built the first show around one Intercontinental title match, and I built the second show around another Intercontinental title match, and it kind of it influenced what my other choices were based on who were participating in those matches. So here's my first all-time WrestleMania card. First match, Owen Hart defeats Bret Hart from WrestleMania 10, the opening match of WrestleMania 10, my personal pick for greatest opening match in the history of WrestleMania, maybe greatest opening match ever, period, of any wrestling show. Owen versus Bret from WrestleMania 10. Then here's our tag team title match from WrestleMania 6, Demolition defeating Andre and Haku, winning the championship, winning the tag titles for the 3rd time Demolition did. So that's the tag match for this one. Moving on, The Rock versus Steve Austin from WrestleMania 19. They fought each other 3 times at WrestleMania. And this one is the last one, and this one has always been my favorite Rock Austin WrestleMania match from WrestleMania 19. So that's on my all-time show. Next up, for the women's title, for the Raw women's title specifically, Bianca Belair defeating Becky Lynch to win the title at WrestleMania 38 Saturday just a couple of years ago. Then we got to have an Undertaker match, and this is not only the best Undertaker WrestleMania match and probably the best Undertaker match period that he ever had, but it's also one of the greatest matches ever and one of the greatest WrestleMania matches ever. The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 25. That is on my first all-time WrestleMania card. And then I mentioned I built this one around an Intercontinental title match. Of course, still to this day, arguably the greatest match in WrestleMania history, one of the greatest matches in wrestling history, period. Ricky Steamboat versus Randy Macho Man Savage for the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 3. I decided for my first all-time card assembled according to these rules, I had to have Savage versus Steamboat. So there it is, Savage versus Steamboat from WrestleMania 3. Next up, my main event title match, my WWE title match in this case. Great feel-good moment from WrestleMania several years ago, and a really, really great match with 2 amazing wrestlers involved. Kofi Kingston winning his first and to date only WWE championship by defeating champion Daniel Bryan to end a really good heel run as champion from Bryan. I missed it the first time around, but I've gone back and caught up on some of it in the last year or so, and some really, really great work by heel Daniel Bryan there as the WWE champion. He dropped the title to Kofi Kingston at WrestleMania 35. And that match was not the main event of its show, so I'm not using it as the main event of this show, but I need to have a WWE title match or equivalent on this show because my main event is not for a title. My main event of my first all-time WrestleMania card is the main event from the very first WrestleMania, the Ultimate Tag Team match at the time. Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Roddy Piper from the first ever WrestleMania. That's the main event of my first all-time WrestleMania card. Total match time for this one, 2 hours and 30 minutes. So when you take that total match time, and then if you imagine this was a real show and you add in entrances and interviews and hype videos and pre and post match angles and stuff like that, you wind up with a total running time of this imaginary show that would probably clock in at around 3 hours. And that's a really nice running time for a wrestling pay-per-view. It's completely bonkers that wrestling pay-per-views routinely run north of 3 and 4 hours. And WWE is largely responsible for normalizing that. I really wish they would just go back to doing 3-hour shows for pay-per-views, even WrestleMania. Right. But anyway, so that's my first one. My second all-time WrestleMania card, because, you have to, you make these choices, and the whole point of having the rules is to force you to make choices, and you have to choose what gets in and what gets left out. And there are so many great matches that I wanted to include in the first card that I just couldn't, that I went ahead and I put together a second one as well. So for the opening match of my second all-time WrestleMania card, because what the hell, WrestleMania is 2 nights now anyway, right? I chose the opening match of WrestleMania 21. Again, strong contender for best opening match of any WrestleMania ever. Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero from WrestleMania 21. Fantastic match. Next, another WWF World Tag Team title match, another demolition match. Can you sense a pattern here? Demolition defeating Strikeforce for the titles at WrestleMania 4. Once again, Demolition winning the tag titles. This time, they were still heels, though. They won the titles from Strikeforce as heels, and then this led immediately after this to Strikeforce breaking up, and Rick Martel and Tito Santana actually feuding with each other for a really, really, really long time. They really didn't. There were a lot of hard feelings after that Strikeforce breakup. But anyway, so that's the tag title match from WrestleMania 4. Next, I wanted to have a John Cena match because John Cena was the other than Bruno Sammartino, John Cena was the longest serving top guy in WWF/WWE history. Not the longest reigning champion, but longest reigning like main event top guy, like the ace of the company. And I wanted to have a Cena match on here. So I chose John Cena versus Rusev for the U.S. title at WrestleMania 31. Next, my women's title match just from last year's Saturday WrestleMania event for what was then called the SmackDown Women's title. They have since renamed it, and now it's the Women's World title. But back then it was the SmackDown Women's title, and it was Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair. Rhea winning the championship, which she still holds to this day and is defending at this coming WrestleMania against Becky Lynch in a highly anticipated match that I am really looking forward to. Hopefully that'll be a great match. But that's my women's title match on this show, Rhea versus Charlotte from last year's WrestleMania Saturday. I also wanted to have a Cody match because Cody is my man. Cody is my favorite current wrestler. Really, really got my fingers crossed that Cody's actually going to win the title this year. I still think he should have won it last year, but hey, water under the bridge. This year's show has been built up really well. So Cody versus Seth Rollins from WrestleMania 38 Saturday, Cody's comeback match when he returned to WWE after his pilgrimage, after his walk through the wilderness. He returned to WWE and had a terrific match against Seth Rollins at WrestleMania Saturday at WrestleMania 38 2 years ago. That's a match on my all-time WrestleMania show. And here's the Intercontinental title match. I said I built both of these shows around the Intercontinental title match. So this is another of my absolute favorite matches from one of my favorite WrestleManias, WrestleMania 8, a very underrated show, I have always felt. But it's Bret Hart defeating Roddy Piper to regain the Intercontinental title from WrestleMania 8. Fantastic match, one of my favorite matches from either guy, two of my all-time favorite wrestlers, and just an outstanding match. So the Intercontinental title match from WrestleMania 8. Another Undertaker match. This is the first time The Undertaker fought Triple H at WrestleMania X7, and my personal favorite of their WrestleMania matches. Undertaker versus Triple H from WrestleMania 17. Really terrific match from both guys. Next up, the classic career-ending match. The Ultimate Warrior versus the Macho King, Randy Savage from WrestleMania 7. Ultimate Warrior's best match ever. Really great match for Macho as well. Of course, Undertaker. Ultimate Warrior defeats Macho. Randy Savage has to retire. The retirement doesn't stick, but for a little while he's retired. He's retired for several months, and then he comes back actually later this same year. That's how long the retirement lasted, but it's a great match. And then, of course, afterwards, there's the great moment where in defeat, sensational Queen Sherry turns on the fallen Macho King, and who comes in for the save but Miss Elizabeth running in from the audience to save her former man, Randy Savage, from sensational Sherry. And then Elizabeth and Macho Man have their heartwarming reunion to the cheers and tears of people in the audience. One of the all-time great WrestleMania angles following one of the all-time great WrestleMania matches. Next up, The Rock versus Hulk Hogan from WrestleMania 18. Again, classic match, icon versus icon, incredibly well-remembered match. One of the great moments of WrestleMania drama, of WrestleMania history. The Rock versus Hulk Hogan, one of the great dream matches ever, and it actually happened at WrestleMania. That's on my show, WrestleMania 18. And of course, to this day, some people still think that should have been the last match on that show, but it wasn't, so it's not the last match on my all-time show either. The last match on my all-time show for this one is the main event of WrestleMania 14, Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF title, as it was called back then. Not the greatest match, but a good match, a very good match, and one of the great moments and most important moments, one of the great pivot points in pro wrestling history. Steve Austin not only winning the title from Shawn Michaels in the main event of WrestleMania, but Steve Austin winning his first world championship. Major moment in the history of professional wrestling, and anointed Austin as the top guy in the industry. Not only was he the top star, but now he was the champion of the number one company. Although at the time, number one company was still somewhat debatable because WWF was still on the comeback and in the process of overtaking WCW after having lagged behind them for a few years. But anyway, Steve Austin's first WWF title win at the end of WrestleMania 14, and it is also the end of my second all-time WrestleMania card. So there you go. That's just what I came up with. I will post the rules that I went over with earlier in the description of this video. So if you are watching this and you are a fellow wrestling nerd, a fellow wrestling mark, as we all are, hopefully we can admit that and be happy with that. That's what we are if we watch professional wrestling. We're just a bunch of marks. But if you would like to come up with your own all-time WrestleMania card according to those rules I came up with, please do so and share it in the comments of this video. I would love to see the different choices that some of you come up with, because there have been so many WrestleManias, and WrestleMania has existed for so long and has covered so many different eras of pro wrestling. And even though it's all WWE, WWF stuff, so there's not a huge variety, there's still a lot of variety within those parameters. There are many different styles of wrestling. Many different incredibly talented wrestlers have passed through WrestleMania over the years and had some tremendous matches and created some tremendous memorable moments. So whatever you come up with, I would be very curious to see. So please feel free to do so and leave a comment with your all-time WrestleMania card. And hopefully we'll all be able to enjoy WrestleMania this weekend. So I'm looking forward to that on Saturday and Sunday. I'm looking forward to reading your choices for all-time WrestleMania cards. And yeah, as Ian Riccaboni would say, happy wrestling, everybody. Go Cody!